Hey, it's Robin Pollock, and I wanted to welcome you to Understanding Your Soul Plan. So, I'm going to be providing a couple of videos which really just give historical information about the soul plan, where it came from, who found it, who channeled it, how does it work, what does the Star of David represent, what are the different triangles in this mandala, what does that represent, and why is that important? So at the beginning, there was a man, and his name was Dr. Frank Alper, and he was really present to all this information. And around, he lived between the 1930 to 2007, and he was introduced to this work really when he moved to Switzerland, and he started working with someone, and her name was Katrina, and she and him were able to translate what this soul plan meant, and they were able to do it by channeling information that they received from Moses. From there, a man named Blue Marsden was also able to channel information from Moses, and was able to put together the work of Frank Alper and this work that he's received, and we're able to come up with a more deep dive and easier approach to understanding all the aspects of soul plan reading. And one of the things that you have to know is that soul plan reading isn't like a standalone thing. It has pieces of astrology, numerology, and celestial information embodied in itself. And I think that the most important thing to really understand is that this work, this information, comes to us at a time when we really are present to receive and accept this information, and it sort of aligns with us. And whatever we find out in our soul plan is really ours to navigate, to accept, to step into. It all has to do with free will, and all the timelines that integrate along the way that allow us to create the changes in our life really have to do with our acceptance of ourselves and receiving of that information. And the more we gain in the certainty of our abilities, the more we get to really obtain and step into our own authenticity. And so in the beginning, many of the world's ancient cultures really believed in this whole idea of the Star of David from before. And the way I explain it in the book that you received is that this soul plan reading and the information from that soul plan reading was all designed and derived with this understanding that it came to us as we incarnated, and that it really operates on your life that's divided into two phases: the worldly side and the spiritual side. And when the two aspects of our life meld together, you get this evolution that happens that creates our soul's destiny. It's almost as if it was an unlocking of a code. So when you understand your birthday, it really sort of signifies your appearance as a separate entity and a separate identity. And the intent of the sound and the soul, along with the company of like your astrological conditions and what's going on in your innate body, usually has a gradual process, because as a baby you were really no idea that you were a separate entity from your mom. And as you started to develop, you started to understand your separation from her, and where you lie in terms of like the environment around you. Your name actually is usually different from the original name that you were given at birth. But when you start to look at the letters of your given name, most people find that to be an accurate beginning to looking at their original soul plan, because you begin to recognize all the influences that happened in your life to arise this transaction and the ability for you to be able to step into your authenticity. Your birth name that was given to you by your parents allows you to incarnate some of the aspects of your divine soul plan by allowing the frequency of the letters of your name to hold weight. And by transferring those letters of your birth name, that frequency, the sound, and what it carries really depicts the characteristics and the personality traits that you actually are emanating from you. And many of it has to do with what your soul incarnated to step into in this lifetime. There are many people who know about the zephyr. It's one of the oldest mystical texts that are around. And it has, each letter corresponds with sounds and a celestial body, and also a part of your body and numerology. And it's only affiliated with the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. There are a lot of people who believe in the Star of David and hold its polarity in what it holds for us in terms of up and down triangle. That in of itself is a polarity, and the sides of the triangle. And if you actually look at each triangle as it goes around, and you think to yourself that your characteristics are formed within all of these triangles, right? What they all bring you to understand is your soul's destiny. As you achieve all of them and you become more and more enlightened and truer form to your soul's authenticity, it's when you get to step into your soul's destiny. The thing that we need to understand about the symbols is that there is a polarity that occurs, and that all of the symbols really are within all of us, that they're fragments of them within all of us, which is the reason why when you're around certain people and they actually hold those symbols, many times that in and of itself can be a trigger to us to respond in a certain way. And so it's always important to remember that we all possess the polarity of all of the symbols, but specifically certain symbols resonate more with us, and those are the ones that come out in your soul plan. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the history. And the Star of David, a lot of people call it, or the Star of Creation, really finds its humble beginnings in many religions, not just in Judaism, but in Kabbalah and in other religions as well. Start to look at the star as a source of information for us to learn from. It processes a set of frequencies what are placed around the star, like I showed you, that represent challenges, talents, and goals. both on the worldly level and on the spiritual level. And let's see. And what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is the zephyr. And the zephyr is this text where all the information was derived when we first found out about that text. We were able to understand the Merkabah, which is another word for the Star of David. Understanding both the top and the bottom of the triangle and how they actually work together is something that you really have to lean on with your own intuition. You can memorize all of the names of all of the symbols. You can even memorize all the astrological signs and all the numbers and numerology. But the truth is that in order to be able to understand how they all dance together, how they all work together with duality, it's when you really have to lean on your own intuition to be able to have it speak to you. I spoke a little bit about the star, and what I want you to understand is that worldly goals usually happen between the ages of birth to 35. And those goals usually get resolved within themselves, or pieces of them start to get resolved. And we get to step into our spiritual domain. And you get essences of the release of some of these timelines, I want to call them, as we grow and as we learn. And the more we release and the more we let go, the more we get to transcend into a higher spirituality in general. And basically, what this is basically saying is the more you release the lessons that we learn through the worldly goals, the more we get to transcend through our spiritual goals and spiritual challenges. So, for example, what it looks like a trauma that might happen in worldly challenges might also appear as a worldly goal, but then when you look at the worldly talent, they sort of work together to allow for the expansion of this trait so that you actually get to step into the fullness of it. And there's a lot of shared strength that happens amongst the star that bring about your soul's destiny. The spiritual aspects also talks about spiritual goals, spiritual talents, spiritual challenges. And when you take on all of them, the worldly plus the spiritual, in the end, what you wind up with is soul's destiny. And allowing yourself to understand and be spiritually aware that we are an integration of all of the worldly goals and all the spiritual goals. And with maturity, we all get to go through all phases of everything and allow ourselves to transcend to a higher level of ascension, a higher level of frequency, and a higher level of understanding. And instead of laying blame and placing blame on things, being able to see things as coming in our way, coming in our path, that were challenging and even trauma and devastating, as being something that needed to happen in our lives to cause the next thing to happen. And there are many people in our lives that show up as the abuser, as the person who is doing things that are unjust. And they came back into our lives to hold that space, to cause a shift in us, to be able to create that shift and change. So in some ways, in most ways, those people that show up in our lives in that way, we have to get to a place where we get to have compassion for them and know that they showed up in our lives as this person that we didn't look kindly upon, this person that we wanted nothing to do with and push away, because they created such a trigger in us that they fortified a change in us to actually allow ourselves to transcend into a higher space. For some people, worldly goals and spiritual goals feel intangible. It's like you can't put your finger on what any of these things are. And for those people, many of you feel as though you don't really understand that side of it all, that spiritual side of it. And that's okay. And that means that that information isn't ready for you to understand yet, which is why it's important for you to take in the information that resonates with you in the here and the now, today. And then allow that other information that doesn't make sense, that doesn't serve you, sort of just to wash over you. And know that you can come back to it and fine tune it and listen again when you're ready to listen. So the point is for you to be present to the information that does resonate with you, and to ask questions about the things that make sense that you want to delve into, and allow those pieces that are speaking to you to have a voice. And what I also wanted to say about the destiny is that when you look at the highest potential, your overall progress, this aspect becomes even more powerful and predominant the more you move through all the lessons and the challenges and the goals in your life. But what I also want to point out is that those destiny symbols and numbers can shift depending on who you are in your life. If you get married, if you live with certain people, if you have certain people in your life, in your family, and how those energies actually impact your energy. Many times if you're born with a certain name, like for example, my name is Robin Iris Schoen, but I don't use that name. I use Robin Pollock. And so when I did a soul plan of Robin Pollock as opposed to Robin Iris Pollock, looked completely different than the one for Robin Iris Schoen. And so when you start to shift your name because of how you are showing up in the world, you shift the energies that you're attracting, and you shift the energies that you're manifesting, and you also shift the space that you're in and what you're traveling in and what you hope to accomplish. And you do that by shifting through all the lessons that you've learned from one place into the next space, into the next space. I hope this all is making sense to you, and that you've written down a couple of questions so that we have our question and answers, that I can answer anything that you want to know. Thanks for tuning in today. Bye.